They never noticed him. That wasn't an exaggeration or self-pity. It was simply a fact. If someone had tried to describe him later, they would struggle. Not because he was strange, but because he was forgettable. His name was Aaron Koda. He lived in a narrow apartment where the walls were thin enough to hear arguments that weren't his, laughter he wasn't invited to, and footsteps that never stopped at his door. Every morning, he woke before his alarm. Not because he was disciplined, but because anxiety never let him sleep deeply. He believed that if he caused no trouble, life would return the favor. That belief would cost him everything. Aaron worked at a small logistics office on the 4th floor of a gray building that looked tired even in daylight. He arrived early every day, not to impress anyone, just to avoid being in the way. On his first day years ago, his supervisor told him, "If you just do what's needed, you'll be fine here." Aaron took that sentence as a rule for living. He did what was needed, then a little more, then far more than anyone asked. When someone forgot to submit paperwork, Aaron stayed late. When someone missed a deadline, Aaron apologized for them. When mistakes happened, Aaron said nothing. Not because he was weak, because he believed someone had to absorb the damage. And he could handle it. One morning, Mara arrived late. Again, she dropped her bag on her desk and sighed loudly, making sure everyone heard her exhaustion. "Traffic," she said. No one asked. Aaron noticed the report she was supposed to submit still untouched. He hesitated. He always hesitated. Then he stood up. "I can finish it," he said quietly. Mara smiled. Not a grateful smile, a relieved one. "Thanks," she said. "You're a lifesaver." Aaron sat back down, his screen filled with numbers that weren't his responsibility. Around him, keyboards clicked. Phones buzzed. Someone laughed at a joke he didn't hear. By the time the supervisor arrived, the report was done. Mara stood and presented it confidently. She didn't mention Aaron. No one looked his way, and Aaron felt satisfied. That was the worst part. On the way home, it started to rain. The kind of rain that soaks your shoes immediately and crawls up your legs. At the crosswalk, a woman struggled with grocery bags, one tearing open at the bottom. Oranges rolled across the wet street. Cars honked. People sighed. Aaron stepped forward. He knelt in the rain, collecting the oranges, placing them gently back into the bag. "Thank you," she said, breathless. He nodded. By the time he stood, his pants were soaked, his palms sticky with dirt and juice. The light turned green. The woman hurried away. She never looked back. Aaron stood alone as the rain continued to fall. He didn't feel heroic. He felt correct, as if this was what he was meant to do. That night, he heard shouting through the wall. A man yelling. A woman crying. Something crashing. Aaron sat on his bed, staring at the wall. He could knock. He could call someone. He could intervene. Instead, he pressed his ear closer. The shouting stopped. Silence returned. Aaron exhaled. He told himself, "It's not your place." That thought followed him to sleep. The next morning, the hallway smelled like metal and disinfectant. An ambulance light flashed outside. The neighbor's door was open. Someone whispered, "She fell." Another said, "I heard yelling last night." No one said anything else. Aaron felt something heavy settle in his chest. He thought about the wall, how thin it was, how clearly he had heard everything. At work, he couldn't focus. Mara leaned over his desk. "You okay? You look tired." "I'm fine," Aaron said. She smiled. "You always are." At lunch, the supervisor announced a review. Mistakes had been found in a recent report. The room went quiet. Mara frowned. "That's strange," she said. "I followed the numbers I was given." The supervisor turned to Aaron. "You assisted with that report, right?" Aaron opened his mouth. He could explain. He could clarify. He could say the truth. Instead, he nodded. "I'll fix it," he said. The supervisor sighed. "Please do." The meeting moved on. Mara avoided his eyes. Later, she whispered, "Sorry." I panicked. Aaron smiled faintly. "It's okay." He meant it. That scared him. That evening, Aaron stood at the train platform. A man stumbled near the edge, drunk or exhausted. It was hard to tell. People stepped away. Aaron stepped forward. He grabbed the man's arm as the train rushed past. The man cursed him, yanking free. "Mind your business." The crowd stared. Someone laughed. Aaron stepped back. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from confusion. He had done the right thing. Why did it feel like a mistake? That night, he wrote in a small notebook he never showed anyone. If kindness has a cost, why does it never show the price up front? He closed the notebook. Outside, sirens wailed. Somewhere, someone needed help. Aaron lay down, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, he would wake early. Tomorrow, he would help again. Because that was who he was. And he had no idea that caring was already marking him.
Arn didn't notice the pattern at first. People only came to him when they needed something, and they left him invisible when they didn't. It was a slow, creeping realization, like a shadow lengthening in the late afternoon. It started with small, almost insignificant things. One Tuesday, a coworker named Shin spilled coffee all over his own files. A dark, spreading stain on a pile of important paperwork. "Ah, crap," Shin muttered, flapping his hands uselessly over the wet papers, a look of pure panic on his face. Arn, sitting nearby, quietly got up, went to the supply cabinet, and grabbed a stack of clean, blank forms. He walked back and placed them on Shin's desk. "Here," he said softly, almost a whisper. Shin blinked, as if just noticing Arn was there. He took the forms with a shrug. "Thanks. You're a lifesaver, man." And that was it. A fleeting smile, a brief moment of gratitude, and then nothing. No follow-up, no real acknowledgement. Un just nodded, returned to his desk, and tried not to think about it. The next day, it was something else. Shin had forgotten to file a crucial report. The deadline was looming, and the oversight could cause problems for the whole team. Without being asked, Ein stayed late, long after Shin had cheerfully waved goodbye and left for the evening. Un found the missing data, compiled the report, and submitted it, his keyboard clicking away in the silent, empty office. The next morning, Shin walked in without a word, completely oblivious to the late-night rescue. The pattern repeated itself, becoming a quiet rhythm in Aaron's life. A forgotten task here, a last-minute favor there. It wasn't malicious, Aaron told himself. He tried to rationalize it. People are just busy. They're careless. They don't mean to be ungrateful. They just don't think. But the rationalization started to feel hollow. A weight began to settle in his chest, heavy and persistent. Every favor he completed, every problem he solved, every extra effort he put in it all went unnoticed. He was the office ghost, the silent fixer who appeared when needed and vanished when the crisis was over. And then, one day, someone did notice. But not in the way he'd hoped. It was Mara. She leaned over his desk one afternoon, her chin resting on her hand, watching him silently type numbers into a spreadsheet that wasn't even his. "You're always doing everything," she said, her voice smooth and even. Unflinched, startled. I just tried to help," he whispered, his eyes fixed on the screen. She smiled, tilting her head. It wasn't a kind smile. It was a smile of calculation, of assessment. "Do you ever think about yourself?" she asked. Aaron shook his head slowly. I guess not." "You should," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. And with that, she turned and left, her steps deliberate and loud, echoing down the long gray hall. Un felt the weight of her words, but he didn't know what to do with them. It felt like a warning he couldn't decipher. 2 weeks later, the first real crack appeared. A delivery company contacted the office, claiming a large, important shipment was missing. Panic rippled through the department. The supervisor, a woman whose stress was a constant simmering presence, immediately pointed her finger at Ione. "You were responsible for tracking that order," she said, her voice tight with irritation, her face flushed. Un opened his mouth. He could explain. He could pull up the logs, show the timestamps, prove that his work was accurate and that the fault lay elsewhere. But before he could speak, Shin cleared his throat. I didn't see him submit the tracking," Shin said nervously, avoiding Aaron's gaze. The supervisor's sharp eyes then swiveled to Mara. "And you?" she asked. Mara hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough to make it seem like she was wrestling with her conscience. She started, her voice full of false reluctance. "I assumed it was handled." The words hung in the air, unspoken but deafening. accusing him without ever needing to be said. An said nothing. He just stood there, the silence swallowing him whole. He knew it would take hours, maybe even days, to untangle this web of blame and prove his innocence. And by then, it wouldn't matter. The narrative would already be set. He felt the eyes of the entire office on him. Some were curious. Some were judgmental. Some were just completely indifferent. And in that moment, he realized a crushing truth. The kindness he had given so freely, so unconditionally, was now expected of him. It had become a currency he never signed up to trade, and now he was in debt. That evening, the rain started again, a steady, dreary drizzle that matched his mood. Arn walked through the city streets, his head down, watching the neon lights blur and ripple in the puddles beneath his worn-out shoes. Near a corner store, a man suddenly collapsed onto the wet pavement. People glanced, then quickly looked away, hurrying past. No one stopped. Arn hesitated. It was his default setting, a pause, a moment of internal debate. But his nature won out. He acted. He knelt beside the man, the cold water soaking through the knees of his pants, and checked for a pulse. It was there, thready but steady. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. The man groaned, barely lifting his head from the concrete. Then he focused his eyes on An and snarled, "Get off me." A few people in the crowd that had gathered at a safe distance laughed. Arn flinched and stepped back. The man then spat, a glob of saliva landing right on Aaron's shoe. Drenched, humiliated, and with his heart pounding in his ears, Aaron walked away. Why do I keep doing this? The question echoed in his mind, but no answer came. Back at work, things only escalated. The supervisor called him into her office for a meeting. "An," she began, not even bothering with pleasantries, "we're going to need you to cover Shin's entire workload for the next month. He's taking a well-deserved vacation." Arn opened his mouth, a polite refusal forming on his lips. I already have my own work. It's a heavy load as it is." The supervisor just waved a dismissive hand. "You'll manage. We trust you." Just then Mara, who had been lingering by the door, poked her head in with a bright smile. "See? You're really dependable." Arn felt the walls of the office closing in. Dependable, reliable, useful. He wasn't a person anymore. He was a tool, something to be used until it broke. The days bled into weeks. A monotonous blur of extra work and unspoken resentment. Uncompleted tasks that weren't his. He absorbed blame that wasn't his. He smiled politely at his colleagues in the hallway, even as he felt more invisible than ever before. And outside the sterile office walls, the chaotic city continued its relentless pace. One night, while walking home, he saw an old woman struggling to carry her groceries across a busy intersection. Without a second thought, he took her bags and helped her to the other side. She patted his shoulder, her hand frail and wrinkled, and looked at him with kind, watery eyes. "You're too good for this world, young man," she said. He managed a faint smile. "Too good for this world." The phrase followed him all the way to the train platform. The fluorescent lights above flickered erratically. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a man leaning too far over the edge of the platform, swaying unsteadily as a train approached in the distance. Instinct took over. Un lunged forward and grabbed the man's arm, pulling him back to safety. This time the reaction was violent. The man twisted around and shoved Arn hard in the chest. "You fool!" he shouted, his face contorted with rage. "Mind your own business." The crowd of commuters just stared, their faces blank masks of silence. And Arn, drenched from the rain, bruised from the shove, and soul-crushingly tired, finally realized something profound. Helping was no longer safe. Not for him. Maybe not for anyone. Back in the quiet of his small apartment, an empty notebook lay open on his desk. He picked up a pen and wrote a question. When does helping stop being noble? When does it start punishing you? He stared at the ceiling for a long time, the city sound, sirens, arguments, laughter, tears drifting in through his window, a chaotic symphony of human experience. And a quiet, suffocating truth settled over him. People don't reward kindness. They exploit it. They expect it. And the world just doesn't care. Just then, his phone buzzed. A text from Mara. "Hey, can you cover my shift tomorrow? I have something urgent come up." Arn stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the screen. He knew the answer he should give. He knew what he always did. He always said yes, because refusing would feel like giving up on the person he thought he was, and giving up felt unthinkable. Even as his body ached with exhaustion, even as his mind screamed warnings. He typed his reply, "Of course. I'll handle it." And somewhere, deep inside, in a place he didn't want to look, he knew this was only the beginning. The first accusation came quietly. No shouting. No confrontation. Just a look. Arn noticed it during lunch. Two co-workers stood near the vending machines, whispering. When he approached, they stopped. Their eyes slid away from him like water off glass. He told himself it meant nothing. People whisper. People talk. But the air felt different, sharper. That afternoon, the supervisor called him into her office. She didn't offer him a seat. She rarely did. She said, folding her hands on the desk. "We need to talk about an incident." He nodded. He always nodded. "There was a delivery issue last week. A client claims confidential material was leaked." Aaron's chest tightened. I only handled the tracking," he said softly. "I didn't. We know," she interrupted. "But your name keeps coming up." "Coming up where?" he wanted to ask. He didn't. Silence had always protected him before, or so he thought. When he returned to the office floor, Mara avoided him. Not just eye contact proximity. She shifted her chair away when he passed. She laughed louder with others. Her voice rose whenever she spoke near him, like she wanted witnesses. Arn felt a strange chill crawl up his spine. That night, he took the long way home. The city was loud, restless. Neon signs flickered like dying stars. Somewhere, a couple argued openly, their words sharp and rehearsed. Arn walked past them. He always walked past. At his apartment building, a young woman stood near the entrance, crying quietly. She looked no older than 20. Her phone screen was cracked, her hands shaking. Arn hesitated. Every instinct told him to keep walking, but instincts had never been his guide. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She looked up, startled, then relieved. I think I lost my wallet. I don't know what to do." Her name was Aiko. She had just moved to the city. She didn't know anyone. Her landlord had locked her out for missing a payment she insisted she'd made. Arn listened. He always listened. "You can sit inside," he said. "I'll help you figure something out." That was his first mistake. The second was calling the landlord for her. The third was letting her use his phone. The fourth was believing her. Over the next few days, Arn helped Aiko relentlessly. He accompanied her to the police station. He helped her fill out forms. He lent her a small amount of money just until things settle. She thanked him endlessly. "You're so kind," she said, smiling weakly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Those words felt warm, dangerously warm. At work, the tension thickened. Someone's password had been compromised. Files went missing. Again, Aaron's name surfaced. "Were you here late that night?" The supervisor asked. "Yes," Aaron answered honestly. He was always here late. Mara watched him from across the room, her face unreadable. One evening, as Irene returned home, police lights bathed the street in blue. His building. His chest tightened. Two officers stood near the entrance. "Arn Koda?" one asked. He nodded. "We need you to come with us." The interrogation room smelled like stale coffee and metal. They asked him about Aiko, his phone. the missing files. Aaron's thoughts spiraled. I only tried to help, he said quietly. The officers exchanged a look. They always do that look, Aaron thought. The one that says you don't know how this works. Aiko had used his phone to contact someone involved in the leak. She claimed Aaron insisted on helping her access certain systems that he offered. Aaron felt the room tilt. That's not true, he said. But his voice sounded small, thin, like it might tear if pushed too hard. The officers released him after hours of questioning. No charges. For now, they said. But the damage had already been done. The next day at work, the silence was unbearable. Conversation stopped when he entered a room. People avoided sitting near him. The supervisor assigned his tasks to others without explanation. Mara finally approached him near the copier. I didn't know you were like that, she said quietly. Like what? Anne asked. She shrugged. You know, and walked away. That night, Aaron stood in his apartment, staring at the wall. The same thin wall, the same silence. He remembered the night he heard shouting, the night he chose not to intervene. It's not your place. Now it was his place. And he wished it wasn't. He opened his notebook. His hands trembled as he wrote, If I speak, I'm guilty. If I stay silent, I'm guilty. When did doing nothing become a crime? He closed the book. Outside, someone screamed. Aaron didn't move. The next morning, Aiko texted him, I'm sorry. I didn't think it would go this far. He stared at the message. Did she mean it? Did it matter? He typed back slowly. Why did you say it was me? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, I didn't think they'd believe me. Aaron set the phone down. His reflection stared back from the dark screen. And for the first time, he understood something terrifying. Kindness doesn't just hurt you. It gives people permission to use you as a shield. That night, he stood at the train platform again. The wind roared through the tunnel. Someone near the edge swayed. Aaron watched. He didn't move. The train arrived. The moment passed. People dispersed like nothing happened. Aaron felt sick. Not because he failed to help, but because a part of him felt relieved. only consequences. He wrote one final line in his notebook before closing it for good. Maybe the problem ice into kindness. Maybe it's me. Ern first learned about the article by complete accident. He was sitting in a cafe, one he couldn't really afford, trying to find some solace in a cup of coffee. Above the counter, a muted news channel played on a loop. Suddenly, the image froze. A pedestrian bridge crisscrossed with police tape. A silhouette, blurred and indistinct. Then the headline slid across the screen. When nitrogen monoxide won helps. The cost of modern indifference. Aaron's stomach plunged. The reporter's lips moved with a silent, practiced urgency while subtitles rolled beneath her. Witnesses say dozens passed by. One man was seen standing nearby. He did nothing. The screen changed to a grainy photograph. It was him. The angle was awful, capturing him from behind, half-turned, his hands hanging uselessly at his sides. His face wasn't clear, but the posture was unmistakable still, unmoving, utterly passive. A stranger at the next table leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Disgusting," he muttered to himself, just loud enough for Ian to hear. "How do you even live with yourself?" Owen shot up from his chair so fast it screeched against the tiled floor. The sound echoed in the quiet cafe, but no one looked up. No one stopped him as he walked out. By that evening, his phone had become a relentless source of torment. It wouldn't stop vibrating. A constant stream of unknown numbers, missed calls, and messages from people he'd never met flooded his screen. Someone had posted the image online. Then, someone else had found his name. Coward. Monster. If you were there, you're responsible. The accusations were endless. Hein finally powered his phone off. The silence that followed felt louder, heavier than all the noise. The next day, the digital witch hunt bled into the real world. Cheaply printed flyers started appearing all over his neighborhood, pasted carelessly on lampposts and brick walls. "Have you seen this man?" He watched and did nothing. His photo, that same unflattering, grainy image, was plastered everywhere. Un tried to tear one down, his hands shaking, only to find another one on the next block. By afternoon, there were dozens. He stopped leaving his apartment. Food deliveries were left outside his door, but even that wasn't safe. Sometimes the bag would be kicked over. Once, someone threw a drink at his door, the sticky liquid splashing against the wood. Late at night, he'd hear shouts echoing down the hallway. "People like you are why this city is rotten." Ern would just sit on the floor, his back pressed against the wall, listening to the footsteps hurry past. No one ever knocked. No one ever bothered to ask his side of the story. A popular talk show picked it up. They debated the morality of his inaction under bright studio lights, their faces radiating a kind of self-satisfied concern. Is inaction a crime? One host mused to the camera. When does watching become a form of violence? Another retorted. And all the while, Aaron's image flashed on the giant screen behind them, presented like evidence in a trial he wasn't invited to. They never said his name. He wasn't a person anymore. He was a concept, a symbol of modern apathy. Mara, his ex, texted him for the first time in weeks. The message was short, clinical. "They're asking questions at work." A beat later, another message. "I didn't tell them anything." And finally, "Just thought you should know." Ern stared at the screen, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. He typed a reply, then deleted it. He tried again. Deleted it again. In the end, he sent nothing back. What was there to say? One night, the walls of his apartment felt like they were closing in. He couldn't breathe. Desperate for air, he went outside, pulling a hat low over his eyes and covering his face with a mask. But it didn't matter. Someone recognized him anyway. There he is. The word spread through the quiet street like a spark in dry grass. Phones were instantly lifted, their small lenses pointing at him. Whispers sharpened into accusations. "Why didn't you help him?" A woman shouted, her voice trembling with rage. Arn opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His throat was tight, his mind blank. A man stepped forward, getting right in his face. "You think you're better than us?" Finally, Arn found his voice, though it cracked with a pain they couldn't understand. I used to help everyone," he said, the words tumbling out. "Every single time. And it destroyed me." For a brief, fleeting moment, the crowd went quiet. But then someone laughed. A harsh, ugly sound. "So now you help no one?" Another voice sneered. "Convenient." Someone shoved him. It wasn't hard. Just a pointed, deliberate push. Un stumbled backward but managed to catch his balance. He looked around, a desperate plea in his eyes. No one intervened. No one stepped in to help, but someone was filming. Of course, someone was filming. That night, Arn returned to his empty apartment with a split lip and hands that wouldn't stop shaking. He stood over the bathroom sink, watching his diluted blood swirl down the drain. He looked up at his reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. He looked smaller, diminished. He found the old notebook, the one he had sworn he was done with. He opened it to a blank page. The city, the world, it seemed they demanded kindness from him. And when he gave it, they punished him for it. Now they demanded his guilt. His pen hovered over the crisp paper. "I can't be all three," he wrote. He closed the notebook. The days crawled by. As it always does, the relentless news cycle moved on. Another tragedy captured the public's attention. Another face to scrutinize, another debate to be had. But the damage to Aaron's life was permanent. His landlord slid an eviction notice under his door. The reason cited was simply complaints. No further explanation, no chance to appeal. On his last night in the apartment he once called home, Aaron packed his few belongings in silence. As he carried a heavy box down the stairs, he saw a young boy struggling to open the heavy lobby door. The boy looked up at him, his small face filled with a simple, hopeful expectation. Aaron paused. For a single stretched-out second, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then he walked right past him. The door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing in the empty hall. Outside, the city lights burned with a cold, indifferent glare. And in that moment, Ayn understood something with a terrifying, soul-crushing clarity. Society didn't actually want kindness. It didn't want heroes. It just wanted someone to blame. And once it found its target, it never, ever let go. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more content that explores the complexities of our modern world. Stay safe and take care. Aaron stopped keeping time. Days blurred together once he left the apartment. He slept where he could on overnight trains, in cheap hostels that didn't ask questions, sometimes on benches when exhaustion won. The city didn't look different. That was the cruel part. Everything continued as if he had never mattered. The first thing he noticed was the absence of the pull, that familiar ache in his chest whenever someone struggled. It was gone. A woman dropped her bag at a station entrance. Papers scattered like startled birds. People stepped around them. Unwatched. Nothing happened inside him. No hesitation. No guilt. No urge. He walked on. And for the first time in his life, the choice felt easy. He found work unloading boxes at night. Cash only. No names. The foreman never looked him in the eye. Just pointed, barked orders, handed over money at the end of the shift. It was perfect. No expectations, no trust, no disappointment. Un kept his head down and his mouth shut. People like that. One night, during a break, a young man sat beside him. "You hear about that guy?" The man asked, chewing on a sandwich. "The one who watched someone die?" Un stared at the concrete floor. "They say he just stood there," the man continued. "Didn't even move. People lie, Aaron said. The man shrugged. Doesn't matter. Makes a good story. Yes, Aaron thought. It always does. Weeks passed. Unlearn how little you need when you stop caring. Food tasted the same whether it was earned kindly or taken indifferently. Sleep came easier without guilt. Silence stopped being heavy. He started to feel lighter. That scared him more than anything before. One evening, as rain soaked the streets again, Ain found himself near the bridge, the same one. He hadn't planned it. He never planned anything anymore. A small crowd had gathered. A woman stood on the other side of the railing. Her hands shook violently. Phones were already out. Someone whispered, "Call the police." Someone else said, "Don't get involved." Aaron stood at the back, unseen, unremarkable. The woman cried. She said she was tired. She said she couldn't do it anymore. The words fell into the air and shattered without echo. Aaron felt nothing, not relief, not fear, just distance. A man near him whispered, "Someone should help." Aaron looked at him. The man didn't move. No one did. Minutes passed. The police sirens were far away. Too far. The woman looked down. Then back at the crowd. Her eyes met Aaron's for half a second. There was no accusation there, no plea, just resignation. She climbed over. The crowd screamed. Someone dropped their phone. Aaron didn't flinch. Later, in the news, they would call it another tragedy. They would blur her face. They would ask the same questions. Where was our humanity? Why didn't anyone help? Un already knew the answers. That night, he sat alone under a streetlight, rain dripping from his hair. A child walked past with his mother, tugging at her sleeve. "Why didn't anyone save her?" the child asked. The mother tightened her grip. "Sometimes," she said softly, "people are afraid." Aaron almost smiled. He realized something then. The world didn't break him when he was kind. It broke him when it punished kindness. What remained wasn't cruelty. It was emptiness, and emptiness was safer. Months later, the story resurfaced, a compilation video. People who did nothing. His blurred image appeared again, paired with others. Different faces, same silence, different tragedies, same outrage. Un watched the video on a cracked phone screen. The comments scrolled endlessly. Monsters, cowards. I would have helped. They always say that. Aaron turned the phone off. He stood up and walked away. The final panel of the manga would show this. A crowded city street. Someone collapsed in the foreground. People frozen mid-step. Phones raised. Eyes wide. And An walking past. No anger on his face. No sadness. Just absence. This manga doesn't punish you for being cruel. It punishes you for caring. Until caring is something you can no longer afford.